In 2018, the entire United States was on edge, closely following the fate of a 20-year-old college student who went out for her usual evening run and suddenly vanished without a trace. The whole country watched as the search unfolded, but for weeks the police couldn't find a single solid lead. When the shocking truth finally came to light, it rocked America and sparked intense, heated debates across the nation. Today, we're going to tell you the full story of Mollie Tibbetts and the devastating consequences of her tragic disappearance. Mollie Tibbetts was born on May 8, 1998, in San Francisco, California. When she was in second grade, her parents decided to get a divorce. After that, Mollie, her mother, and her two brothers moved to the state of Iowa. Despite the divorce, her father continued to maintain a close and warm relationship with his children, regularly staying in touch with them. After successfully graduating from high school, Mollie enrolled at Iowa State University, where she chose to study psychology. In her free time, she worked at a daycare center. Mollie always led an active and vibrant life. She regularly exercised, had a large circle of friends, and often shared her positive moments on social media. Her Instagram account was full of bright, joyful photos. In the summer of 2018, Mollie was staying in a tiny town called Brooklyn, also located in Iowa. The town covered just over 1.2 square miles, and only about 1,500 people lived there. At first glance, it seemed like the kind of peaceful place where everyone knows each other, and nothing truly terrible could ever happen. On July 18, 2018, Mollie decided to go for her usual run. At that time, she was living with her boyfriend, Dalton Jack. That evening, she was home alone because her boyfriend had left for work in another city about 130 miles away from Brooklyn. Before heading out, she sent him a photo via Snapchat and started her run around 7:30 p.m. The next day, Mollie was supposed to show up for work, but she never arrived. This deeply worried her family and loved ones. Everyone who knew Mollie understood that she was extremely responsible and would never miss work without letting someone know. On top of that, she stopped answering phone calls and messages entirely. Eventually, her family decided to contact the police. From the very first days, the investigation into her disappearance began attracting widespread attention, not just in Iowa, but across the entire United States. For the residents of small-town Brooklyn, the disappearance of this young woman was a real shock and a heavy blow. Nothing even remotely like this had ever happened before in their quiet community. Mollie's father, Rob Tibbetts, flew in from San Francisco to Brooklyn to take an active part in the search for his daughter. He personally handed out flyers with her photos, asked questions, and did everything he could to help the investigation. Mollie's parents held on to hope until the very end that their daughter would be found alive and unharmed. Several major agencies quickly joined the search for Mollie: the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the FBI, and the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office. In total, investigators followed up on more than 2,000 leads and interviewed around 600 people. The search effort was extensive and covered all the surrounding areas of Brooklyn. At one point, law enforcement received a tip that Mollie had supposedly been seen at a truck stop in the city of Kearney, Missouri, about 112 miles from Brooklyn. Police thoroughly checked this information, but found no evidence to support it. As is standard in cases like this, investigators first looked into whether her boyfriend might be involved. However, this time it was different. Dalton Jack had a rock-solid alibi. At the time Mollie disappeared, he was physically in another city and could not possibly have been in Brooklyn that evening. Time passed, but the search yielded no results. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation announced a large, cash reward for any credible information that could help find Mollie alive and safe. The reward amount kept growing and eventually reached a record $366,000 for the state of Iowa. Later, police announced that they had narrowed down the search area and were now focusing on several specific locations around Brooklyn. These included her boyfriend's house, several local farms, a gas station, a truck stop, and a car wash. Unfortunately, none of this led to finding Mollie. Investigators received hundreds of different tips, but almost every one of them led the case into yet another dead end. However, one episode raised particular suspicion. The owner of a pig farm, where police had been concentrating their search, was extremely reluctant to cooperate with law enforcement. The man strongly denied any involvement in Mollie's disappearance, but he refused to take a polygraph test. His behavior automatically made him a prime suspect at the time. Unfortunately, there was no direct evidence against him, so police had no legal grounds to question him formally or search his property. Once again, the investigation hit a wall. The situation changed dramatically on August 21st, 2018. Shortly before that, a source within law enforcement told journalists that police had discovered a body. Almost everyone immediately assumed it was Mollie, and sadly those assumptions turned out to be correct. On August 21st, the police issued an official statement. The body of Mollie Tibbetts had been found in Poweshiek County, the same county where the town of Brooklyn is located. With heavy hearts, her parents identified their daughter. Investigators immediately noticed that two important items she always took with her on runs were missing: her smartphone and her fitness tracker. Soon after, the medical examiner released the official cause of death. Mollie had been attacked and stabbed multiple times. This news shook the small town of Brooklyn even harder. Everyone there knew each other well, and they could barely comprehend that a murderer was living among them. Almost immediately after the body was discovered, police arrested 24-year-old Christian Rivera, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who had illegally entered the United States about 7 years earlier. All that time, he had been working on various farms under the false name John Barth. Police identified Rivera after carefully reviewing surveillance footage from cameras near Mollie's usual running route. The videos clearly showed a Chevrolet Malibu driving back and forth along the road with no apparent purpose. According to the initial investigation, Rivera quickly confessed to the crime. In his own words, he was driving by when he noticed Mollie running. She caught his attention, so he drove past her several times. These repeated trips were most likely what the surveillance cameras had captured. At some point, he stopped the car, got out, and began running alongside her. He started making advances, trying to talk to her and gain her interest. Mollie didn't like it at all and threatened to call the police. When she reached for her phone, Rivera attacked her. Afterward, he left her body in a cornfield and fled the scene. However, once in custody, Rivera suddenly changed his story and claimed he remembered nothing about that evening. It's likely his lawyer advised him to do so. Formal charges were filed against Rivera on August 22nd. The trial began on September 19th, where he pleaded not guilty. The legal proceedings dragged on for nearly 3 years. Rivera's family hired 2 experienced attorneys who did everything possible to secure either an acquittal or the lightest possible sentence. The entire country followed this trial closely. The crime had occurred during Donald Trump's presidency, at a time when he was strongly pushing for stricter immigration policies, with particular focus on Mexico. The Trump administration used Mollie's case extensively for political purposes, citing her tragic fate as a clear example of why immigration reform was urgently needed in America. At the same time, Mollie's father, Rob Tibbetts, repeatedly and firmly spoke out against turning his daughter's death into a political tool. Unfortunately, his pleas were largely ignored. The story of one young woman continued to dominate national headlines, almost entirely framed around the heated debate over immigration laws. The length of the trial was also significantly affected by the coronavirus pandemic. The main phase of the hearings only began on May 17th, 2021. Rivera continued to insist on his innocence, but his chances of a favorable outcome were extremely slim. On May 28th, 2021, the court finally delivered its verdict. Christian Rivera was found guilty of first-degree murder. He received the maximum sentence allowed under Iowa law, life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will now spend the rest of his life behind bars, supported entirely by American taxpayers. Thanks for watching. Some photos and videos couldn't be shown here. For the uncensored version, scan the QR code on your screen. Liking and subscribing really helps the channel grow and lets me make more content like this.